Ever wonder why recent videos of US Navy fighter pilots trying to lock onto tic-tac UFOs never fire at them, although they are invading restricted military airspace? Well, even though the Pentagon claims it doesn't know what these objects are, according to some ufologists, this non-confrontational policy goes way back to 1952, when it is claimed that then-President Harry Truman rescinded a direct order to shoot down these UFOs after an unusual flap of them had been sighted in Washington, D.C. and throughout the United States that year. They also claim Truman rescinded his shoot-down order because renowned scientist Albert Einstein and other esteemed academics told the president that the order was not a good idea. Began with World War II Foo Fighters. They say that direct presidential involvement in the flying saucer situation for President Truman began in 1949 when he commissioned a study into the Foo Fighters UFOs that plagued both sides during World War II. The Foo Fighters were meter-wide balls of light that paced the German and Allied planes during the war. Both sides in the war considered the possibility that the other side used the objects as secret weapons. The issue of what the objects were was never really resolved during the war. General Jimmy Doolittle headed up the study Truman had ordered into what the Foo Fighters had been. The study done by General Doolittle concluded that both sides had reported having been paced by the objects. Doolittle also concluded that the objects had not been secret German or Allied weapons. Instead, Doolittle told President Truman that the objects were most likely of extraterrestrial origin. During the early 1950s, the United States military was being inundated with UFO sightings, and some feared it would grow into full-blown panic among the citizenry. More and more, the Washington Press Corps was demanding answers about this puzzling phenomenon plaguing U.S. skies. Does Truman send a message? Trying to stay in front of this issue, President Truman on April 4, 1950, through his press secretary, supposedly made the following statement to reporters. "I can assure you that flying saucers, given that they exist, are not constructed by any power on Earth." Some reports have the statement coming at a Washington press conference. Unfortunately, Truman was at his Key West, Florida residence on the day in question, and did not hold a press conference on that day. Each day of the presidency, however, his press secretary Charles Ross would usually hold 2 press scrums with reporters to answer questions. As a later Time magazine article more accurately put it, the statement about the president's claimed ignorance of the situation came from his press secretary. The April 17, 1950, Times article stated, "In April 1950, Truman sends word through his press secretary that he knows nothing about the saucers." July 1952, shoot down UFO order. During the summer of 1952, there had been a large rash of UFO sightings all over the United States. The sightings extended to 2 very public waves of UFOs being tracked from 3 different locations as they flew right over the White House, the Capitol, and the Pentagon on July 19th and July 26th. The Air Force conducted a major investigation into the appearance of the objects. The UFO sightings were headlined in newspapers all over the country and in some places, replaced the Democratic National Convention on the front page. A massive buildup of sightings over the United States in 1952, wrote Gerald K. Haynes in an article for the CIA, especially in July, alarmed the Truman administration. It is claimed that this led the Truman administration to give the order that the flying saucers be shot down. On July 26, 1952, the Air Force obeyed and gave the order to shoot them down! However, they claim that several prominent scientists, including Albert Einstein, protested the order to the White House and urged that the command be rescinded, not only in the interest of future intergalactic peace, but also in the interest of self-preservation.
Extraterrestrials would certainly look upon an attack by the primitive jet firepower as a breach of the universal laws of hospitality.
The shoot them down order was consequently withdrawn on White House by 5 o'clock that afternoon, they claim. Here is a short video about Truman's alleged about-face. Back to square one now, more than 70 years later, the Pentagon's latest public stance is that it still doesn't know what a small minority of these UFO UAPs are, but promises to continue to study the phenomena. However, it appears that the Pentagon is holding fast to, what I like to call, the so-called Truman doctrine of not taking potshots at these uninvited intruders.